I created this video to answer the question most people don't even realize they need to ask. How do abusive relationships actually form? Because they don't start with yelling, insults, financial or emotional control. They start with charm, with closeness, with stories that sound like love. And the moment you see that clearly, the descent, the shift, the trap, something in you changes. That's what this video is about. And by the end, you'll understand how you got here and how to begin standing again. I'm going to walk you through four models of abuse that most people have never heard of, but every victim has lived through. They don't sound like abuse at first, they sound like connection, like care, but they're traps. And once you see them, you'll never unsee them. This is a slower paced video because it's deep. It's designed to give you language, clarity, and a sense of relief. So if you're here, stay with me because this might be the moment things start to make sense. I built Stand Again because no one ever told me what I'm about to tell you, and I lived it as a father, a survivor, and someone who's rebuilt everything from the ground up. This isn't theory, it's what I'd wish I'd known back then. No one plans on ending up in an abusive relationship. No one sees their partner, sees the abuse, and chooses that life willingly. No one stays in an abusive relationship because they choose it either. They stay because they've been conditioned, managed, and emotionally trapped into it. You don't fall into an abusive relationship, you grow into it slowly. Each step feels like the natural next one until one day something happens, a push from your abuser that goes too far, and you blink and you realize the ground beneath you has completely changed. Personally, I never saw myself as someone who would end up in something like this. I was a dreamer. I wanted the storybook happy ending. I didn't think I was a fool. I performed well in school academically, professionally, I was quite successful, I worked hard, and I was respected. What I've learned in hindsight is I also carried things I didn't fully understand. I was a people pleaser who lived with imposter syndrome, and in some ways, those flaws helped me progress in my career. But when it came to relationships, I was naive. I thought being a good partner meant putting your own needs aside, that if your partner was happy, everything else would fall in place. Happy wife, happy life wasn't just something I'd heard, it was something I had been taught since I was a child. I didn't grow up around abusive relationships. I grew up with a traditional British dad, old black and white films, and Elvis movies. Love in those stories looked simple, sacrifice looked noble. I had no model that showed me how those beliefs could make me a perfect target. So when I met the woman who would later become my wife, I only saw someone who mirrored my values, echoed my interests, and I leaned in quickly. I didn't see red flags for what they were. I thought I'd found something rare. The connection was instant. She moved in fast. It felt like we were on the same page. But there were red flags, things that happened early in the relationship that I didn't have the maturity or strength to walk away from. I still remember the first moment something felt off. We were out with one of her friends, maybe our fourth or fifth date. And around that time, she was already talking about moving in, about how forever we were. It was the first time I had met this friend, and my girlfriend at the time became a completely different person around her. Loud, performative, obnoxious, making sharp jokes at my expense, drinking heavily, and making a scene. I felt this strange dislocation. Her whole presence had changed. I remember sitting across from her thinking, I don't recognize this woman. It didn't feel like a quirk, it felt like I was in front of a complete stranger, not the kind, soft spoken, romantic person I'd been connecting with. So I made the first compromise, the first moment of explaining away her behavior. I told myself, it's not her, it was her friend. Her friend must be a bad influence. The real her was the one I knew in private. So instead of questioning the woman I was dating, I grew to dislike her friend, the one I blamed for making her behave so rudely. After all, the connection felt strong. We shared so many interests and values, and the sex was off the charts. So to keep her, I explained away her behavior. And more deeply underneath it all, I was scared of being alone. That had always been my fear since I was young, the one that whispered, it's better to make it work than to end up by yourself. I didn't see it then, but that moment across the table was the beginning of a long line of ever increasing compromises and excuses I made for her behavior. The first red flag, the first time I abandoned what I knew in favor for what I hoped was true. That's how abusive relationships start. Not with chaos, not with screaming and yelling, but with charm so convincing, so enticing that you abandon your values and your boundaries for the illusion they create. And when you're carrying your own unhealed wounds and poor behaviors, like the need to overfunction to prove your worth, to stay loyal no matter what, you don't see the danger you're in. This video is about four of the most common models for how abusive relationships are formed. It's about the experience of being in a relationship that over time becomes abusive. And while we won't cover every tactic used to destabilize and trap you, we will explore the broad shape of how abuse escalates and why so many of us get stuck in it. If you want to understand the specific tactics abusers use, I encourage you to check out the Blueprint of Family Violence Against Men deep dive series. And if you find value in this content, I ask that you like and subscribe. Your support helps ensure the voice of male victims of family violence is heard and understood. Now, before we dive into the models themselves, we need to talk about how abuse works and what makes someone a target. Abusive people often don't present to the world as volatile, unhinged, or overtly cruel. And that's what makes them so dangerous and so destabilizing for victims. In fact, when I first spoke up about my experience, not even my own family believed me. But she's so sweet and lovely. On the surface, in front of others, she'd never been described as a monster. But what abusive people are is manipulators, highly skilled ones within that one topic. Not skilled in an admirable way, not insightful, not strategic, not wise, but skilled con artists, shaped through years, sometimes decades, of instinct, trial, and repetition. These aren't behaviors they've discovered in adulthood either. These are patterns that began early in childhood. They learned that control brought relief, that blame brought calm, that escaping responsibility got them what they wanted. And over time, without correction or self awareness, those patterns hardened. So by the time you met them, they'd already spent years, maybe decades, refining their methods. That's why you got caught. That's why it worked. And it's why you shouldn't blame yourself for it. Because while you were offering trust, they were collecting data. While you were learning how to love them well, they were learning what you needed most and how to turn it against you. They studied you, mirrored you, adapted to you until the trap was set. And part of what made that trap so effective wasn't just their manipulation, it was your vulnerability to it. Abusive people don't target just anyone. They tend to seek out people who are emotionally open, people who are loyal without question, people who work hard and are successful for it. And they also look for something else: unhealed wounds and existing immaturities. Maybe you feared abandonment, maybe you believed love had to be earned, maybe you were raised to prioritize peace over truth, or taught that real men work hard and don't complain. Maybe no one ever modeled healthy boundaries for you, or you confused self sacrifice with strength. These aren't flaws, but they are openings for manipulation. And the more honest you can be about the patterns you brought in, the more power you can reclaim now. And here's the truth: these people aren't masterminds, they're not deep thinkers. Most abusive people lack two critical things. The first is self reflection. They don't think in terms of growth or healing or consequence. They move on emotional instinct, not moral compass. When they feel something uncomfortable, like shame, guilt, fear, or weakness, they can't sit with it. They have to offload it. If they can make you carry it, then in their twisted logic, they don't have to. And because they never look inwards, they don't emotionally learn, they don't grow, and they don't stop. That's also why most of the literature says don't ever expect them to genuinely change. The second thing they lack is the ability to plan long term. They're driven by impulse and ego, not insight. That's why their stories fall apart under pressure. That's why their lies unravel when light shines on them. That's why you see them time and again destroy the good things they had going for them because they can't think through the long term consequences of their actions. If they were truly as clever as they think they are, you wouldn't be here right now, listening to this, rebuilding your life and breaking free. So, no, you weren't stupid for falling for it. They spent a lifetime perfecting the mask and the hook. You only had a moment to see behind it. But you will also, in time, need to face your own vulnerabilities, the one that allowed the abuse to take hold. But for now, the fact that you're here, seeing clearly, standing again, tells you everything you need to know about who was actually strong. Let's get into the four models. Because not every abusive relationship starts the same way. Some begin with romance, others with crisis, sometimes it's vulnerability that gets weaponized, and other times it's just sheer emotional chaos that clouds judgment. In certain situations, it's not even confined to a single person. Whole systems and communities or ideologies around gender roles can reinforce coercive control, make the abuse feel normal, even justified. But for most men, it starts with a model, a set of emotional cues that slowly escalate, not all at once, but step by step, until you're in too deep to realize you're drowning. There are four models for how abusive relationships are formed in the context of family violence. They aren't rigid categories. An abuser might switch between them or use several at once, depending on what has the best effect on you. But here we lay them out separately so that you can see them clearly. We'll do them in summary now and then detail later. The first model is the entrapment fantasy. This is where you feel like you've finally found the one, the perfect woman who matches your heart's desires. And over time, that illusion fades. You get stuck in a cycle of abuse, trying to reclaim something that never actually existed. The second model is the rescuer to ruler. This is where she casts herself as the victim and you as the savior. Over time, you end up taking on more and more accountability for her emotional states until your entire sense of self is in service of her well being, not your own. The third model is the I told you so confession. This is where she gives you early, explicit admissions of her dysfunction or her unrealistic expectations. I'm the queen, you're the knave. If you push back on the abuse, she either says it proves your low value and deserved it, or tells you, I warned you, you knew what I was like, and now it's your fault for staying. And finally, the fourth model is the chaos trap. This is where the relationship begins with intensity and instability, and it never stops. You become so busy managing the whirlwind that you fail to realize you're losing yourself. Each of these models doesn't begin as highly abusive. Yes, there may be red flags, sometimes more than one, right at the start. But if you're not looking for them, they're easy to miss. And each model reveals the emotional scaffolding that allows abuse to escalate gradually, depending on how manipulable you are, and how the abuser holds that dynamic in place when you're in it deep. Let's step through each of these models slowly and with the care that they deserve. Have you ever looked back at a relationship and thought, was any of that real? That's model one, the entrapment fantasy. This is when you feel like you've finally found her, the one. This model begins with idealization. The early connection doesn't just feel exciting, it feels profound. She marries your interests, reflects your values, says things you've always longed to hear. And usually there's rapid sexual and emotional intimacy. You don't just feel attracted, you feel chosen, understood, even healed. That sense of resonance creates a powerful emotional pull. And because it feels so genuine, you don't second guess it, you lean in. But in hindsight, it wasn't really about you, it was about what you represented: stability, devotion, loyalty, and how quickly she could secure control. The rapid connection wasn't a coincidence, it was a tactic, which you can learn more about in the blueprint of family violence against men. The more quickly you are bonded, the less time you have to notice what doesn't feel right. And the longer you stay in the fantasy, the more invested you become in preserving it. At first, everything seems flawless. Her affection feels unconditional, her words are generous, her enthusiasm is disarming. But then, quietly, slowly, the rules start to change. Warmth becomes dependent on your performance, affection is withheld, praise is replaced with subtle critiques. And before you know it, you're shifted into a mode of trying to earn back something that was once given freely. This is when the manipulation deepens. It starts with quiet experiments testing your responses and your boundaries. She watches how you react to guilt, to shame, to withdrawal. She learns what evokes compliance in you and what provokes resistance or anger. And over time, your emotional responses are shaped by her. You start accommodating, you stop questioning, you give more, hoping to restore what was lost, not realizing it was performance all along. Once she knows you're emotionally hooked, such as when you've moved in together or you're proposed, the escalation begins. These are turning points. Each one brings an escalation. And once you're fully emotionally hooked, like having children together, sometimes you see the mask fully fall away. And behind closed doors, the true face of your abuser can finally be seen. This is because she no longer needs to earn you or lock you into her madhouse. You're already in there. You've already altered your boundaries, questioned your instincts, and internalized the belief that your job is to keep the relationship afloat, no matter how confusing or painful it becomes. And that's what makes this model so devastating, because the very thing that once felt safest, the intense connection, the early closeness, turns out to be the trap. The love you believed in becomes the weapon used against you. And even as a cruelty emerges, a part of you still longs to get back to how it was. You think maybe if you try harder, she'll become that version of herself again. But that version never existed. It was a mask and a hook, not a foundation for love. This model works because of its emotional intoxication, because it floods you with the illusion of safety, makes you question the very instincts trying to protect you. And it succeeds because of what you brought with you when you met and when you stayed with each compromise. Your longing to be loved, your hope to be understood, your hunger to feel chosen. If you were carrying loneliness, self doubt, or a belief that love needed to be earned, then this model can be attractive, like a form of salvation. You weren't just falling in love, you were chasing wholeness. But love isn't meant to feel like rescue. And until you understand how your own unmet needs were used to bind you, the cycle remains vulnerable to repeating. If you've ever been in a relationship that started with her pain and ended with yours, then that's model two, the rescuer to ruler. This is where she's broken and you're her savior. This model doesn't begin with charm, it begins with her pain. From the start, she tells you how deeply she's been hurt by her ex, by her family, by the world. The stories are always raw and moving. She opens up quickly, and you feel honored to be trusted with her pain. Her vulnerability feels real, and it stirs something deep in you. You want to protect her, you want to be different, and without realizing it, you start stepping into a role you didn't consciously agree to, her rescuer. It feels noble, like purpose and strength. You become the patient one for her, the forgiving one, the one who understands her better than those who hurt her, the one who has finally given her the love she never received. In time, though, her trauma becomes a shield for criticism. Her volatility becomes your responsibility to manage. And when things go wrong, when she lashes out or shuts down or crosses lines, it always comes back to what she's been through and how you need to help her with it. Your job isn't to be a partner anymore, is to understand, to absorb, to stay. You're no longer allowed to be human with your own troubles, your own fluctuating moods. If you voice a need, you're told it's too much for her. If you set a boundary, you're accused of being unkind. And if you make a mistake, the blame isn't just personal, it's moral. You're failing her, you've triggered her, you're not doing enough. And if she explodes or mocks you, it's explained away as trauma, not abuse. Your job is to hold space, regulate the dynamic, and try harder next time. What began as compassion slowly turns into compliance. And the more you try to help, the more power she accumulates. Eventually, once the emotional hooks are in and you've accepted your role, she stops presenting as someone who needs support and starts acting like someone who dictates the terms for her well being. She defines the rules, she shapes the story, she controls the emotional tone of the relationship. And if you ever push back, the response is always swift and calculated. After everything I've been through, you know how vulnerable I am. How can you do this to me? That's the pivot point. The moment the victim becomes the ruler and you, the one stepped in to help, now find yourself managed, corrected, and blamed. Your empathy is no longer a bridge, it's a weapon turned against you. And every attempt you make to recalibrate the relationship is treated as cruelty, betrayal, or weakness. This model is especially dangerous for emotionally intelligent men, men who take pride in being supportive, calm, and self aware, because it hijacks that strength. It convinces them that endurance is love, that silence is maturity, that surrender is the right thing to do. But the truth is harder. It's not your job to heal someone who refuses to take responsibility for themselves, especially when their wounds are used to justify hurting you. Part of what makes this model work so well is how closely it mirrors your identity. If you were raised to be reliable, if you equate value with usefulness, and if you have been taught that love means fixing someone, it's harder to see when your morals have been weaponized against you. It feels honorable. You're the one who stays calm, you're the one who holds the line. But underneath that, there's often a fear that if you stop helping, you'll stop being loved. You may also carry deep programming about what it means to be a good man, that you don't walk away from suffering, that you take it, that you hold space even when it costs you your voice. And because she shares her trauma so often, you start to believe that standing up for yourself would make you heartless. That's the trap. Because eventually you're not being asked to love her, you're being asked to erase yourself in service of her pain. This model doesn't just succeed because she's manipulated your values, it succeeds because you were never taught that love can include limits, that kindness can include boundaries. What if she warned you she was going to hurt you and then blamed you when she did? Well, that's model three, the I told you confession, where she says, I warned you, so now it's your fault. Often this starts on the dating profile. The lines can even contradict themselves. I want a traditional man who knows how to lead and provide, followed by I'm independent. I won't be told what to do. It's not confusion, it's a test for those susceptible to it. Can you meet all her needs without ever voicing your own? Early in the relationship, she continues this pattern, but now it's framed as raw honesty. She tells you, my love language is insults, or I want someone who knows how to handle a high value woman, or I'm the jealous type. It's just how I am. You may think you're hearing transparency, but what you're actually hearing is a setup for abuse. Because when the behavior surfaces, when she explodes, sabotages, belittles, she doesn't deny it. She leans in. I told you what I was like. It's not a confession, it's a contract. And now you're the one who's broken it. That's a trap. You don't feel shocked anymore. You feel responsible. You knew what you were signing up for. So when the abuse arrives, it's no longer framed as her issue, it's framed as your choice to stay. This model reframes abuse as consent. You're not a victim anymore. You're someone who willingly agreed to the terms. And once that logic takes hold, every protest sounds like betrayal. Over time, your voice erodes. You stop objecting. You stop drawing lines. Her behavior no longer feels like something to be accountable for. It feels like something you're expected to endure. It's just how she is. She doesn't use confessions to own her impact. She uses it to avoid it. That's why this model flies under the radar. It wears a mask of authenticity. But disclosure is not accountability. Being open about your capacity to harm does not make the harm acceptable. This model is particularly effective on men who value loyalty and those who live under the false belief that declarations of authenticity somehow excuse the behavior that comes from them. Cultural norms can also reinforce it. I once received a comment on a video about emotional withdrawal used in coercive control, and the comment read, Dear knave, that's not the problem. It is the symptom. When someone is not vibing, think high value queen facing knave, prince not high value king. Let's talk. As muddled as that sentence was, the user attempts to dress it up like charm and frame it like some sort of insight. But underneath was the same message. If you are being abused, it's your fault. You misunderstood. Her cruelty is just a response to your inadequacy. She treats you badly not because she's abusive, but because you weren't worthy of better. That's how this model works. It reframes her poor behavior as an expectation of the relationship and casts your suffering as proof that you deserved it. It's a self justifying fantasy. If she hurts you, it confirms her view of you. And the worse she treats you, the more entitled she feels to keep going. Because in her story, she's not the aggressor. She's just the queen responding to your failure to be a king. And when that fantasy is paired with cultural language, empowerment slogos, or faux spiritual wisdom, it becomes persuasive, especially if part of you already fears it might be a little bit true. But here's the truth, someone naming a toxic behavior does not excuse it. Just because you saw the storm coming doesn't mean you deserved to be left out in it. You're allowed to walk away, even if they warned you the weather would be rough. And finally, you kept waiting for things to calm down, but the storm was actually the plan. That's model 4, the chaos trap. This is when there was never a quiet moment to see the truth. The model starts with motion, stress, crisis, intensity. From day one, something's already gone wrong. Maybe not with the two of you, but she's in the middle of a breakup, or she's battling family dysfunction, or there's some sort of trauma or pressure. There's noise. And you enter the relationship like you're her port in the storm. And somehow it becomes your job to hold the umbrella, to shield, to stabilize, and to absorb. There's always a reason she's distressed, stressed, or offended. a reason she doesn't have time to talk calmly, a reason conflict can't be resolved yet, a reason she's short, distant, or overwhelmed. Her world is unstable, and your cast is the one meant to bring calm. At first, you see this as strength. You feel proud of how grounded you are, how reliable, how steady. You tell yourself the chaos is temporary, that when the dust settles, the connection will deepen. But it never does, and it's not meant to. This model doesn't gain control through logic or dominance, it gains control through confusion. It creates a constant state of motion, so you never get to pause long enough to reflect. If you're always reacting, so a meltdown, a health scare, a family drama, a financial disaster, whatever it is, then you're too overwhelmed to ask bigger questions. Like, is this the right relationship for me? Am I signing up for never ending crisis? The chaos becomes camouflage. It's a smoke screen. And behind it, the real manipulation, the gaslighting, the blame shifting, the control is much harder to see. The emotional tone shifts constantly. You fight in the morning, she cries in the afternoon. You reconnect that night. Then the next day, it all resets. Tears, rage, silence, laughter, repeat. You never know which version of her you'll get, so you adjust. That's what it does to you. You soften your tone, you apologize first, you anticipate her moods before they arrive. You live in reaction mode, not because you've agreed to it, but because your nervous system has adapted to survive it. And in managing her, in reacting constantly, you lose your ability to respond with thought, with deep reflection, because there's never enough time to. This isn't a fast escalation, it's a constant rush that erodes your clarity. And by the time you realize the abuse is happening, you're already too emotionally depleted to make sense of it. You've spent months, even years, telling yourself it was just a difficult season, but it wasn't. This model is especially dangerous for men who pride themselves on being calm. If they were raised to be dependable, to stay composed, to be the rock in other people's storm, then you see this chaos and think, this is what strength looks like. You don't just tolerate it, you feel validated by it. Proud of how little you ask for, how much you absorb, how well you manage her emotions, clean up her mess, hold the house together while she unravels. But that pride becomes your prison. Your ability to survive chaos becomes the very thing that keeps you trapped in it. You confuse endurance with love. You confuse adaptability with virtue. You convince yourself that the best men never need anything, that their only job is to give more. And in doing so, you stop noticing what you've lost. This model doesn't thrive because you are naive. It thrives because you were trained by family, culture, or experience to believe that good men are fixers, calm, stoic, and unshakable. But that version of you, the one who never cracks, can't live. He can only survive. And when your own pain finally rises, it's drowned out by hers. Because in this model, there's always another crisis waiting. This is the slowest burning trap of them all, and the hardest to name because the whole time you thought you were helping. These four models don't just help you understand how abusive relationships are formed, they help you understand yourself. The version of you that got caught and stuck within the trap. But you weren't weak. You weren't blind. You were loyal. You were hopeful. You were trying to love someone the best way you knew how, even when the cost was your own clarity. But now you have named the model. You've seen how the descent into madness has occurred. You've recognized the shift from love to control, from connection to compliance, from partnership to performance. But that's not the end of your story. That's just the turning point, the educational platform. In the next video, I'm going to go even deeper and walk through why abusers do what they do, what drives them, what they gain from it, why it almost never stops. We'll also explore what happens when you finally wake up, the resistance, the confusion, and the slow return of your own voice. In the meantime, I encourage you to explore the blueprint of family violence against men to more deeply understand the tactics within family violence. Because healing doesn't begin with leaving, it begins with seeing clearly what is happening, fortifying yourself until you can exit, repairing the vulnerabilities in you, and healing the damage caused by the abuse, and then stepping into a life in which you can thrive. If this video was of value to you, please like and subscribe to Stand Again. Your support helps ensure the voice of male victims of family violence is heard and understood. Please visit standagain.com.au to explore the full healing journey and learn how to move from survival to recovery to thriving. You're not broken. You're not weak. And no matter how many times you've been knocked down, you can stand again.